So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, it is time to transition this call. Do not go anywhere. I am actually about to turn this call over to a gentleman that I have a tremendous amount of respect for. This gentleman has his PhD in finance and economics, and he is the one and only finance doctor. So you want to stay put, grab pen and paper, take copious notes as I turn this call over to none other than Dr. Craig Bythewood. Dr. Bythewood, are you on the line?
Yes, I absolutely am, Miss Tasha M. Dyer. The M stands for magnificent training. That really was good. I agree with the BYOBers that was a very, very, very informative training. Thank you for all that you do for this movement. Welcome, everyone, to a talk with the finance doctor, your RX for Forex. We've had a really good week. A lot of things have been said, a lot of growth and expansion, a lot of great questions, a lot of us adding to our tool belt. So I just really want to continue that. So I do have an agenda, but prior to starting, I'd like to comment on a couple of things that Ms. Dyer said today. First, let me start off with a conversation that took place on our 5 a.m. call, I believe it was. And obviously, if I'm mistaken, it was our 9 a.m., but one of the calls this morning. We were talking about a particular facet of the market, and we were analyzing trades. And someone put in the chat, "This is so exciting." And then Ms. Dyer retorted with, "Yes, it is. However," and she used the analogy of the paycheck and said, "Are you excited when you get your paycheck when you're working?" And the answer was no. And the reason why it's a no is because that's what you expect. That's your expectation. So I really want to go a little bit deeper into the truth of that dialogue, because excitement is a beautiful thing. It is a wonderful thing, but it does create a certain bodily reaction, which isn't necessarily designed for the mindset that makes you the best trader. Let me give you a perfect example. When you decide to, say, get on a train and go to a beautiful area in the coast of California, when you are on a train in the coast of California, it's absolutely beautiful, spectacular, all the things that you see. It's beautiful. It's not exciting, but it's beautiful. When you go to a ballet, it's very entertaining. It's very aesthetic, and you can enjoy the movements and the costumes and the music, but it's not exciting. It is a particular term of entertainment, but you wouldn't call it exciting. Now, when you get on a roller coaster, that's different. There's a rush. There's a woo and a woo. You ever been on a roller coaster that sucked? How upset were you when the ride was over? Like, man. And have you ever been on one of those roller coasters where you had to pay for a ride, and you paid and then you waited in line and it sucked? You were like, ugh. Because you didn't get the thrill. You didn't get the movement. So what I'm saying here is that we want to trade in a way where it's a calm, watching a ballet, going down the coast. Here's one. You ever driven somewhere and you drive that route all the time? Then years later, months later, days later, you drive that same route, but this time somebody else is driving and you're the passenger side. You see things you never know. I didn't know that was there. Because when you're just riding, it's just cool. And that's the way we trade. We just ride. We just ride. Because if you've got that roller coaster mentality, if you've got that rush mentality, you know what that's like? Going to the casino. Now, do your thing. If you want to go to the casino, do that. But this is something that we're doing to build generational wealth. I remember when I was a thug, I remember as a former gangster, one of the things we would always say is, don't gamble with that rent money. Okay, I just heard people say that. I'm soft. I'm not a gangster. But when I was around gangsters, they would always say that. Don't gamble with the rent money. That's a universal thug principle. That is a universal principle in the streets. You don't gamble with the rent money. So gambling has a particular energy. It's exciting. It's exciting. I don't gamble, but there's certain things that we all do that's exciting. That's how I feel when I play football. I am 54 years old and I still play flag football. And people say it all the time. Oh my God, you're gonna do this, you're gonna do that. How can you play? It's a rush. I enjoy it. I enjoy being 54 playing with 25-year-olds. But is there some gamble and risk in that? Yes. So all I'm saying is I'm adding to the brilliance of why we want to learn this skill set and be excited about what we can do with it rather than be excited while we're trading. So I hope that makes sense. Great question and great answer. Now, the other thing that was talked about today, which I think is very important, is Ms. Dyer's point about the news and the Federal Reserve and the way in which that event is going to impact the market and therefore impact our trades. So 2 points about that. First point, it's very wise to be aware of things that are going on that are going to impact your trades. I think I mentioned before that I have a 10-minute conversation with my 3 teenage daughters. I can only say that for a couple more days because my oldest is about to turn 20. But when I'm having a conversation, that made my back hurt. When I'm having a conversation with my 3 teenage daughters every single day about trading, I often talk about the fact that when you look at the news, you always want to ensure that you use the news for 2 reasons. Number one, you use the news to make sure that you know what's happening fundamentally that could affect your trade. And 2, that you use the news to know when there's going to be some liquidity in what you're trading. And as a result of that, you can use it to your benefit. So I think it's very wise for us to be expanding our toolkit by talking about how we can use the news to our advantage. That to me, I'm sorry, that to me is something that I think is very valuable. So while I was listening, I began to think about, as I always do, what started it. If you ever get a personal email from me, there are 2 Bythwoodisms. One of them is worry is interest paid on a debt you may never owe. The second one, and the one that I am referencing right now, is this. If you know what you are doing, you will always have a job. And if you know why you are doing it, you will always be the boss. So as I was listening to Ms. Dyer pontificate about the Federal Reserve, I wondered how many of us really understand why there's a Federal Reserve. Now, if you think about the way countries are set up in the world, there are really 2 types of countries from a banking perspective or from an economic perspective. There's, in fact, let's go deeper. If we look at our history politically, there were 2 extremes. We look at our history politically, there were 2 extremes. One extreme was capitalism, where you have the ability to be able to do whatever you want to do from an economic perspective. You have the freedom to be able to be an entrepreneur and let the market dictate what's going on. And then on the other side, there's communism. And communism is where there's a central government that is going to determine all of the economic flow. So capitalism, supply and demand, will create the market. Communism, the government will control it. Now, we decided long ago as a nation, and we're based on freedom. Remember, we broke off from England and came here to have the Revolutionary War because we wanted a revolution, we wanted to be free. So because this country is about freedom, we put ourselves in a position where capitalism is what we want to do. Now watch this. If communism is about having a central government or a central bank, and capitalism is about freedom, then obviously you're not going to have a central bank in the United States because central bank is associated with the economy being controlled by the government, and that doesn't fit in with capitalism. So in 1913, Woodrow Wilson decided that he wanted to have more control over the economy, but he wanted to do it in a way where it would be more capitalistic and not communistic, because communism is associated with a central bank. Now, please understand, I'm talking in extremes. There are all types of countries that have central banks that aren't communist. It's not what I'm saying. I'm just talking about the extremes, and everything else is in the middle. So because we are a country, United States of America, that was founded on freedom, economic freedom, political freedom, freedom of speech, all of the freedoms. I could say something else right there, but I won't. Because we're a country that was based on that, it would not match, it wouldn't be congruent to have a central bank. So what Woodrow Wilson decided to do was this. He decided to gather some capital from wealthy families around the country, and he decided to set up 12 banks. Excuse me. He decided to set up 12 banks, and he decided to call those banks the Federal Reserve Banks. So what would happen is he took the United States of America and he broke it up into 12 geographical regions, and then gave a Federal Reserve Bank an opportunity to be able to monitor each one of those 12 areas. Oh, definitely not control, just monitor. Now, on this call, we've spoken about monetary policy, which means that the government is going to decide how to put money into an economy that needs an injection, or to take money out of an economy that's moving too fast. And that's called monetary policy, and that's done by the Federal Reserve. We also talked about something called fiscal policy. Well, fiscal policy means you're dealing with the money. Money coming in, money going out, money coming in, money going out. Money coming in is taxes for the government. Money going out is government spending. And we talked about for an entire call that fiscal policy is where the government uses taxes, put more taxes out there, then people have less money. Reduce the amount of taxes, they have more money. Government spending, we spend more, now the economy goes up. We spend less, the economy goes down. So every one of these examples are just about the government using its economic power to be able to control, or let me change that, impact the economy. But all of those steps that I just talked about are done by the Federal Reserve. 12 Federal Reserve banks that are set up to do two things. Number one, to distribute money into those areas. So every so often, based on the economic schedule, each one of those banks receives a certain amount of cash flow. They take that cash flow and they disseminate it to the Federal Reserve banks. Okay, wait a minute, what's the Federal Reserve Bank? Now hear me. Every single bank in the United States of America can be under three types of authorization. They can be a federal bank, which means they're a Federal Reserve Bank that's under the Federal Reserve Bank, or they can be a state bank, which means they're under the comptroller of the currency, or they can be a bank that is neither one, but just as, I won't even go into the details, but it's a different type of designation. Most banks, especially large banks, are federally chartered, and therefore they're under the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve Bank, each one of the 12, will take the money and they'll disseminate it amongst each one of those places. Then the second thing they do is what I just said. They act as a central bank, but it doesn't sound like a central bank. Therefore, it's more appeasing to you and I because we want freedom. We came here for freedom. We are a capitalistic society. Therefore, rather than have a central bank, we have the Federal Reserve Bank that does everything. Now, one of the things I like to do to break down to you the way the Federal Reserve Bank works is I like to give you an example with the dollar bill. So I do realize that in 2021, I used to do this example, say, okay, everybody take out a dollar bill, but there's a very high probability you don't have a dollar bill. You know, with the way cryptocurrency is rolling and the way in which the pandemic is affecting our use of cash, it's very possible you don't have a dollar bill. If you have a dollar bill, please take it out. If you do not have a dollar bill, simply go to your Google, type in dollar bill images. I want you to pull up a dollar bill. Pull up a dollar bill, pull up a dollar bill, pull up a dollar bill. I'm talking to give you an opportunity to do it. This is a visual. So right now, you either have a physical dollar bill in front of you, or you have a picture of a dollar bill that you pulled up on Dr. Google. Now, here's how this works. Now, a little bit of history, some of you know, some of you don't. I went to Howard University as a undergrad, and that obviously is in Washington, D.C. My summer job was I was a tour guide for the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. So I worked at the place where they created the money, where they made the money. So didn't know I was going to be a finance doctor, didn't know I was going to get a PhD in finance and economics, didn't know I was going to be greeting you on April 12th, 2021, but God did. So some of the experiences I had then give me a little bit of ability to put all of these topics into perspective and understand why what Ms. Dyer showed you is so significant. And here's something I'll say before we break down a dollar bill. Of the 12 banks, there's one, they don't put it on paper because these are not central banks. God had a plan, I like that. So the major Federal Reserve Bank, or the one that is considered to be the leader, is the one in Kansas City. So then they never say it, it's never overtly stated, but they're given the most amount of responsibility. They're the ones that have the larger office. They're the ones that make most of the decisions. And you'll notice that the program that Ms. Dyer talked about, the event, was based on the Kansas City, Missouri Federal Reserve. Now, pull out your dollar. Pull out your dollar. Now, as you have your dollar in front of you, let's do a brief accounting conversation. Let's just bring it all in. We're talking about finance, banking. We're talking about economics, the economy. Now we're going to talk about accounting. Now, accounting is one of those subjects that we like to act like it's so hard, it's so difficult. And it is, but I like to take complex things and make it easy. $1 billion industry, sports. There are two ways in which we analyze sports. One, we're at the game and we want to know how is our team doing right now. We call that score. Two, we want to know how our team is performing over time. We call that a record. Now, if you take the score and the record, then I just gave you the 3.5-minute version of any accounting class you'll ever take. Because the score basically says, this is how the company is doing right now. We call that a balance sheet. It's so simple. Just think of it as a pie. So the score of how the company's doing right now is a pie. And the pie says, this is all your stuff. It's called an asset. You take all that stuff and then you slice it up. And you slice the stuff up and say, hey, where'd you get that stuff from? Well, either it was my own stuff, equity, or I borrowed it, debt. Equity, debt, equity, debt. I just taught you what a balance sheet is. We're halfway done. Now, the record says, here's how you're doing over time. Well, the record for a sports team is wins versus losses. Same thing. Money coming in, revenue, sales, expenses. That's how much we spent. Boom. Pay your taxes, you're done. That's called the income statement. So the income statement is like the record of a sports team, how the company did over a period of time. How much money did you make? How much did you spend? What's the difference? Balance sheet, what's your score? How you doing right now? How much stuff do you have? And now let me look at all of your stuff, and then let me ask yourself where you got it from. Boom. I said all that to say this. When you look at a balance sheet has those two things I just said. Equity, that's how much you put into the company, and debt, that's how much you borrow. When you look at debt, there are two ways to define debt. There's either short-term debt, got to pay it back within a year, or long-term debt, you got a longer time to pay. Watch me, I'm going somewhere with this. So when you look at the debt of any company, any organization, any government, there are two ways of looking at debt. Short-term debt is called an account. So the amount of money that you owe is called an accounts payable. Well, if it's long-term, it's not called an account, it's called a note. So the amount of money that you owe is called a notes payable. So I said all of that to say, a notes payable is simply a long-term debt. It's something that you owe. That's all I'm saying. Now, what I just described in describing a notes payable is how much is owed by the entity. What is the entity? The company, the family, the firm, the bank, the corporation, the LLC, the sole proprietor, the government. Look at your dollar bill. Now, at the top of your dollar bill, there's a very fancy written phrase that has 3 words. Now, I'm going to read it for you, but you're looking at it too. It says Federal Reserve Note. Federal Reserve Note. Well, the instructor that's breaking down finance, economics, and accounting on the same call said a note is something that you owe. So the Federal Reserve Note simply means this is a piece of paper that represents what the government owes. Let's go a little bit deeper. Prior to 1933, there was a certain amount of gold that stayed in Fort Knox. And the amount of money that we had was based on that gold. So we could only have in circulation the amount of money that was backed up by that gold. But then we decided to go away from the gold standard. So now it's just not backed up by anything other than the fact that the government is telling us they owe it. It says it right there at the top, Federal Reserve Note. Now watch this. Look at the little letter that is on the left-hand side of George Washington. There's a letter there. And I can tell you now, there only can be 12 different letters from A to whatever the 12th letter is. And if you look at that letter, it has a circle around it. And the circle will tell you what Federal Reserve Bank it came from. And if you're using a physical dollar, there's probably a good chance that the Federal Reserve Bank that's there is probably the one that's closest to where you live. So I want to make sure everybody's with me there. It's a letter and it's got all this nice little circular stuff around it. Mine says B, which is the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, okay? So that means that this money is a debt that's owed to me by the Federal Reserve Bank. Now, since we're talking about the dollar, let's go ahead and break it down. Since we're here to make dollars, we might as well understand the dollar. Since the dollar's only gonna be here for a little while anyway, he said that out loud, we might as well talk about it. So if you look at the green letter that's right under the letter, it says B. B is the same letter as whatever it is that you, or whatever Federal Reserve Bank it came from. Then there's a serial number. Now the serial number has a letter after that. Now watch how this works. There are 100 million numbers. There are 100 million, I'm sorry, serial numbers. 100 million serial numbers. So the first time they use that serial number, the last letter will say A, because we use it the first time, the 8th time. A, 8th time. Then when they use it the second time, it'll have a B. Then the third time, it'll say a C. So mine has F. So that means it came from the Federal Reserve Bank B. That particular serial number is associated with the F time, so there's an F. Now, since we're breaking down the dollar, let's just go all the way there. Turn the dollar around. Let's look at the back of the dollar. Now, it's interesting that we oftentimes have these conversations about how whether or not church and state should be separated, or whether or not there should be prayer in schools, or whether or not spirituality is taking away people's creativity. We say all these things. Look at the back of your dollar. The back of your dollar has a pyramid on it. And then there's a gap in between the pyramid and the top. And then there's an eye. So the eye is supposed to represent the third eye. The third eye is that little piece of your brain that allows you to, watch this, tap into your intuition. How many times on this call do I say that we need to rely less on our intellectualism and more on our intuition? I've said it before, I'll say it again. Albert Einstein said, Intuition is a gift. The intellectual mind is a servant. We live in a society that honors the servant and ignores the gift. That something told me, that's God speaking through you. If we could get ourselves out of the way and be spiritually led to everything we do, the same way in which we were led to join this movement, our lives can be so much smoother. And it's right there on the back of your dollar bill. Look at the eagle on the other side. The eagle is our symbol, right? The eagle is our mascot, right? Now watch this. When America was founded, there were 13 colonies. So if you look at the eagle has 2 talons. In one talon, it's got 13 arrows. That represents war. On the other talon, it has a fig leaf with 13 leaves. That represents peace. So what America is telling you is what they stand for. Look at the eagle's face. The eagle's face is facing toward the fig leaf. So what America's saying is this, yo, we're gonna look toward peace, but don't cross me, because we'll have to use these arrows. So all I'm saying to you is this. She started this, she brought the Federal Reserve. I was minding my own business, and I thought that we would take a historical view into who the Federal Reserve is, how it works, and what's going on. Now, last point. I don't believe in conspiracy theories, because conspiracy theories are a waste of time. Because what we need to do is operate in the first 3 letters of this movement. I'm sorry, the first 3 words of this movement. What are the first 3 words of this movement? Be your own. Be your own. If I am looking at a conspiracy and I'm talking about what they're doing, then I am not walking in my be your own. If I'm being my own, then I control my destiny. I'm a co-creator with that third eye. I'm a co-creator with spirit. I'm a co-creator with my intuition to do everything I can to bring empowerment to me. But I figured I would drop this off on the way out of this call. When Woodrow Wilson decided that he was going to create the Federal Reserve, he wanted to have wealthy families to help him finance it. So listen to the names of the families that he got to help him set up the Federal Reserve Bank, which is not a central bank, which is there to help maintain the economic freedom. The Rockefeller family, the Goldman Sachs family, and the Lehman's family. I'm just saying. This has been a talk with the finance doctor, your RX for Forex. Questions, comments, testimonies. Questions, comments, testimonies. Thank you for that. Questions, comments, testimonies.
Doctor, you are awesome, and we are grateful. We just grow every time we come together with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Ms. Brownlee. I really appreciate that. That's so sweet of you to say. Any other questions, comments, or testimonies? Questions, Ms. Dye, stop making me laugh during my call. Questions, comments, testimonies. I appreciate that. Okay, so would either one of the leaders like to say anything? And by the way, Ms. Dyer, I'm using a Google dollar bill. See there? I don't even have real dollars anymore. For what?
You just called me out. But
you know what I'm saying? I mean, what can you buy with $1 anyway? One piece of candy?
But I'm over here doing what you're doing, coughing. So just powerful. We're just here to empower you. That's what this is all about. But I'm gonna mute back so I can cough.
Thank you. Let me say this real quick to EB. The question you asked was, do those families still have influence today? 2 of those families that I mentioned are the names of investment banks. That was my point, that I would never say out loud, but just kind of say. Questions, comments, testimonies from anyone before we close out this week?
I have a comment.
Yes.
I was sitting back here just listening to the story, how you was breaking it down, that dollar bill. I worked for Federal Reserve Bank. So I knew where you was coming from. I was biting my tongue. That's interesting. Very powerful. Thank you.
What is your name?
Patty.
Patty.
Mhm.
So it could have been a talk with Patty tonight, huh?
Very interesting. You
I
see my
appreciate that.
profile picture, don't you?
I don't.
You
But
don't?
I'll look when this is over.
Okay.
Okay. Any other, thank you for that, Miss Patty. Any other questions, comments, or testimonies? Okay, everyone, I certainly appreciate everyone's attention this evening. Thank you for having a great week. I love the energy that this movement is walking in. I see it now, Miss Patty. All right. So we're going to close in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for allowing us the opportunity to have these conversations so that we can grow and expand. Please continue to bless this movement. Every single rectangle that's represented here, bless them, bless their wisdom, bless their movement, bless their families. We are thankful, we are appreciative, and we are grateful. Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. And this will officially end this call. Bye-bye.
Amen. Have a wonderful weekend and feel better.